Hey guys, a big welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be talking about introverted feeling in the 8 positions. This video is going to be very helpful to anyone who's trying to figure themselves out or figure anyone else in their lives out, because no matter who you are, you're going to have FI in one of the 8 positions. So let's just get right into it. FI in the dominant position usually manifests as a keen knowing of one's emotions and the different shades of their own emotions. Feelings are not just felt in the moment and felt when you're transferring them to others or when others are transferring the emotions to you, but they're captured, distilled, analyzed within yourself over and over again. What goes hand in hand with knowing your own emotions is knowing your desires, what you want out of life. And it's not the stereotypical what do you want, as in, oh, when I grow up, I want to be a doctor. It could be something as simple as, I don't want to decide that right now. Or, I want to live in a world where we don't have to choose just one vocation or profession. We could choose to do whatever we want. So that's why the FI dominants are known for being idealists. It's because they know what they want and they know how they would feel in these made-up situations that don't quite exist yet. Also, by retaining all of their past emotions and analyzing them so fiercely, they basically, seemingly magically, know how they would feel if they were to do anything. So, to an outside observer, the FI dominant might seem inactive, or they might not seem to be exploring so much because in their heads they already can imagine if they were to do that, how they would feel. In contrast, now moving on to the auxiliary FI users, they tend to also know how they feel about things, but that doesn't tend to hold them back from exploration. These people tend to be very open to experience, only to reflect and moralize later on. In this sense, they can actually seem a lot less stubborn than the FI dominants. Instead of shutting off an idea as being wrong for oneself, in a way where it's like, oh, I don't want to try that, that's not for me, they tend to try first and then decide later on if it's something for them. FI also tends to be something that takes some conscious effort to use. It's something that they can turn on and off. So you'll see some auxiliary FI users who are caught in the frenzy of action, and they might forget to reflect on what they truly want and how they truly feel about situations. Moving on to the tertiary FI users. So the IXTJs, I find that they don't consciously have to use their FI, but it's always churning around in the background. However, despite using it more frequently than the auxiliary FI users, it's not as strong. So the IXTJs tend to not be very in touch with their own emotions. Oftentimes, they don't know how they feel in the moment until much later, or maybe a little bit later. Tertiary FI users definitely don't know the varying shades of their own emotions. In that sense, it's not as nuanced as the FI of dominant FI users. However, they're always subconsciously processing FI. Therefore, over a long period of time, the IXTJs tend to develop very strong and almost immovable personal values, so that when someone infringes upon these personal values, they can disapprove of that very much. And these can be any values depending on the person, like feminism or capitalism. But the point is, I think that the values are in isolation. The values are stripped away from their emotional cause, and yet they're a product of years of subconscious emotional processing. And in the introverted perception, either SI or NI, they start thinking that this is something right. This is something that they've always believed in, and they forget exactly how they came to that conclusion on an emotional level. And this is kind of why I always giggle when people say that IXTJs are super logical. Yes, they can use logic, but their primary motivations and values are not derived from logic. They're derived from introverted feeling over time that they can no longer pinpoint. Now, moving on to the inferior FI users. They also tend to not know their own emotions and oftentimes even suppress their own emotions. And along with that, they're also suppressing their knowledge of self. A lot of times you might ask a EXTJ what they want to do, and they'll say, whatever you want to do, or they adapt and accommodate the group a lot, so much so that they often seem like FE dominance, which I also talked about in my TE and FE videos if you haven't checked them out. But their reason for doing that is not for social harmony, it's because they're not as in touch with what they want. So for almost all things, anything goes. This can manifest in a lot of different ways, obviously. Like the stereotype is that inferior FI users are mean, but that's only one of the many possible manifestations. Another thing with inferior FI is that these people tend to be very extreme about it. You might hear inferior FI users saying that I am what I am, or you can't change me, or no one can control me. And this kind of tendency is very apparent when someone tries to rule over them or tell them what to do or how to do it. You'll see that suddenly they do care. And this is a result of the aspirational tendencies of the inferior function. They do not know themselves very well or their own emotions and desires very well, but they want to. So if you tell them what to desire, if you tell them how to feel, they're not going to be very pleased about that. All right, moving on to the fifth slot. Now, these people are the ones with dominant FE. These people are also very in touch with their personal emotions, just like the high FI users. However, they tend to prioritize extroverted feeling. So they tend to prioritize the external emotional atmosphere over their personal feelings. And often they think it's selfish even to consider your own emotions at the expense of external emotions. Also, they're quite different from all the people who have FI in their conscious stack in that no matter what they're feeling inside, they are able to translate that outward in a very socially congruent way. So if they're talking about something sad that happened, they're going to look sad, whereas if an FI user is talking about something sad, they might look and emote a high number of ways. Moving on to the sixth slot, or people with auxiliary FE. Now, these people also know their emotions quite well. However, instead of thinking about that inclination as selfish, they use that as a tool to understand the world better via their introverted thinking. Combined with their dominant introverted perception, whether that's SI or NI, these two things rein it back so that when someone is exhibiting an extreme amount of personal feelings that have nothing to do with the external emotional atmosphere, they can sit back and think about that in terms of their introverted perception and their TI, and thus their FE is not trying to change that person around to be like, hey, why are you emoting in such a disharmonious way? They're trying to understand that person basically, and that's what gives the ISFJs and the INFJs a seemingly high command of introverted feeling, and why they're famous for being some of the best counselors around. Now, moving on to the seventh slot, FI, or people with tertiary FE. I find that these people have a very amoral way of decision making. Now, that does not mean that they always have immoral actions. They might live their whole life without doing anything immoral, but the way that they decide to do things is amoral by nature, in that they're deciding what to do based on a combination of personal logic and social proof, or the external emotional atmosphere. And their extroverted feeling is lower, so they tend to not feel the full negative effects of social disharmony. In that sense, they're free to use extroverted feeling as a tool for themselves. When you ask these people what they want directly, they sometimes are at a loss of words, or they might explain what they want in terms of what's logical to do. Sometimes you might even ask, what's your favorite movie? And they might answer, well, this movie has great cinematography and great acting, as if they have to justify personal preferences via a logical backing. And sometimes they'll even say, this is one of the most popular movies of all time, or that everyone loves this movie. So they're using a combination of TI and FE to justify what is usually justified by FI. Like, I just like that, or I relate to the character. And a strong combination of TI and FE is definitely enough to make it through life. But these people can come off a little bit perturbing to people with very high FI, because there's a mutual suspicion as to where each other's motivations comes from. The high FI users are thinking that the FI blind people are being fake, or they don't even have an identity or whatever. And meanwhile, the FI blind people are thinking that the high FI users have no logical backing for their preferences, that their preferences come from nowhere and their desires are coming from nowhere. And it's not going to turn out well because there's no logical reason why it would turn out well. Now moving on to the 8th slot FI, or people with inferior FE. This is very interesting because ISTPs and INTPs often type as INFPs in my experience. I've met a lot of people like that, and it does kind of make sense because to the external observer, the TI dominants often look like FI dominants. I think this is because all IPs share this kind of very quirky, ignoring the external world vibe. Like, if you lead first with the introverted judging function, basically you're operating more based on what's inside, as logical or as emotional as that may be, rather than what's externally evident outside. And still, you're very sure about that. You're very sure about either your logical system internally or your emotional system. So a lot of times the INTP or ISTP knows what they're going to do because they know what's logical and what's not logical in every situation, just as the FI dominants know what they're going to do because in their emotional system, they know how they're going to feel about every situation. So it's these people who look very quirky and like almost detached from the external world who still are very sure, almost stubborn about what they're going to do and how they're going to live their life. Moreover, because these people have inferior FE, FE becomes an aspirational function to them, and thus they're always trying to fit into the external emotional environment better and emote in a more societally accepted way. And all of a sudden, you have a bunch of TI dominants using emotions and transferring emotions and appearing sometimes emotional, and thus they can get typed as FI dominants. Well, that is all I have for you guys today. I really hope you enjoyed this video and that it helped you figure out where your FI lies or where your friend's FI lies. But if you are still unsure, I do offer a typing service on my website, kindof8.com. And if you enjoy this content, please subscribe and consider pledging your support on Patreon. Thanks for watching and see you next time.